My name is Joe Prim, and I am the host of Prepare.Defend.Lead. In this episode, we are going to talk chickens versus ducks. Ducks. And before that, I will give my review, my thoughts, and a debrief on my experience within the Wake Up Warrior Challenge. Stay tuned. We'll get going on the other side of the intro.
The comfort and distractions of today collide to indulge our desires and provide a slow death by apathy. A superior primitive ethos exists. Prepare for tomorrow. Defend what you value and lead those you love. This mindset is the foundation of living an authentic life as a bold, disciplined man resolute in your mission. Prepare, defend, lead. Your mission. Own it.
All right, so here we go. Sorry to those that missed me last week, as I just ran a pre-recorded an old episode of Ever Vigilant in place of a new episode. I'm going to do that a little bit from time to time, just so that I can keep from getting burned out like I did last time running Ever Vigilant. May happen coming up here as we go into the holiday season. I will try to give you guys a heads up when that may happen. But I will dig a little deeper into the archives of Ever Vigilant to find something old that you probably have not listened to before. And let me let you into a little insider secret. If you are at all curious about the podcast that I did before Prepare, Defend, Lead, I did a little podcast called Ever Vigilant for 3 or 4 years. When I quit that podcast, they deleted my archives off of Spreaker, which deleted all my archives of that podcast off of iTunes and all of the other podcast platforms. Right now, though, you can still listen to all of the episodes on YouTube. They were all uploaded there, and they can be downloaded from there. So if you have a real hankering to listen to the beginning of my podcast experience, you can go back and listen to those. How long they will be there, how long I keep them around, or what I end up doing with those episodes, I am not sure at this point. But for the time being, they are there for you to enjoy. I just did a quick double check. Yes, they are all up on iTunes and are on YouTube, and there are like 200 episodes that you can listen to and download from there. So this last week and this last month has been a crazy, wild ride for me. I listened to a podcast several years ago with a guy named, I listened to a podcast episode, I should say, where there was a guest named Garrett J. White. And this guy intrigued me in this episode of this podcast I listened to because of his honesty. He was straightforward. There were pulled absolutely no punches and spoke truth. So I did a little looking into who this character was that was very powerful in the way that he delivered his message and his idea of what it means to be a man. And again, like I said, pulled no punches really in calling out men on their BS. Calling out men to take responsibility, take ownership of their lives, and to get their stuff together. So I looked into Garrett and looked into the Wake Up Warrior program, and at the time, several years ago, they really were only doing, or I shouldn't say really were only doing, they were only doing physical, in-person, seminar training, physical training type program. And the price tag on this program was very high. Again, I do not doubt the value on that program whatsoever, but $10,000 out of my price range. If I had the money, something that I definitely would attend, but I know that those programs were somewhere around that price tag. But in the back of my mind, I was always thinking about that program and thinking about if I had that money, that would be something that I would invest it in, that I would like to hear what this guy, Garrett J. White, had to say. Because of his straightforward honesty in calling people out. You see, you get to a point when you work with men every day and where you are in a position where you're leading men and where you've done a podcast for men for the last several years now, where you realize that it's time to stop coddling. It's time to stop accepting people or other men using the fact that they believe they're a victim for an excuse for the way that they live. That blaming their wife, blaming their kids, blaming their job, blaming their in-laws, but never taking any responsibility themselves. So, again, I found that refreshing, and I wanted to hear what this guy had to say. Fast forward to coronavirus time, and they revamped and revised and restarted doing things a little bit differently over there at Wake Up Warrior, and they started a virtual type program. And when I saw that, I investigated. I looked into it. I wanted to know what this program was about. And the more I read into this program, the more I looked into it, the more intrigued I was. Because the value of what they were selling, or what it appeared that they were selling, for $100 for 30 days of training seemed well worth it. So after these 30 days now, I just graduated. I just went through the program. I did everything. I followed the process day after day after day. And this is what I will tell you. It was worth every penny. It blew me away. The way this is organized, the way that it is brought to you, it's a revolutionary program. Now, I'm not telling you this as some sort of ambassador. I paid the full price. In fact, I have continued on with the program, paying to continue moving forward and progressing through their program because I see the value in it. So let me break down a little bit about why I feel this is so unique, why I think it's so different, and why I believe it's so effective. And life-changing, really, for me. I'm the guy who, for the last 4 or 5 years, right, I've talked about the changes in my life. I've talked about putting in the efforts to build a better relationship with my wife and my kids, to build the family, to give into and be a leader in your community or in your church or in the organization where you work. The necessity for us as men to step up into that role. And I've been talking about that, and I've been reading books on that, on leadership. I've been reading books on being a better father. I've been listening to podcasts. I've been listening to audiobooks on all of these different topics, trying to learn, trying to get a better grasp, not only on what it means to be a man, what it means to be a good man, a good husband, a good father, but also a real true grasp on how you do that. because we can understand what we want to do. We can have a half of an idea of where we want to go. But if we do not have the tools to do it, it doesn't matter. Right? It's like coming up to a building or a house that say, yeah, we want this house demoed. We want to bring it down to the foundation. And you, in your mind, you can say, okay, I understand that they want this house torn down. And with my hands, my bare hands, I can get started. I can maybe punch some holes in the drywall with my feet, with my boots, and I can start peeling drywall off of the wall. But if you have the right tools, a wrecking ball, or you have a bulldozer, or a bobcat even, where you can just make sure the gas is shut off, make sure the electricity is shut off, and just go to town breaking it down, you are that much more effective. You can understand what you need to do. You can have a clear picture of where you want to go. But without the tools to do it, it is very, very difficult. So one of the things, or a few of the things that are brought to the table with this program are tools to help you understand where you're at. You know, of course, it started out with who are you, which every program kind of starts out with, right? But is completely valid, because a lot of times in our life, that is where we need to start. For a lot of us, we struggle with who we are. Honestly, who we are. Not who we want to be in the future, not who we were in the past, not who we want our coworkers to think we are, not who we want our wife to think we are, not who we want our children to think we are, but who we actually are, right? So that's your starting point. Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want? These are questions that most of us struggle to answer. They are questions that most of us have not contemplated, have not walked all the way through to the end. Through this program, they help you in that area. Help you understand the story that you're telling yourself and why you're limiting yourself. Help you understand the lies that you tell yourself on a regular basis that are holding you back from being the husband, the father, the man that you can be. But along the way, there are tools to help you understand and get a better grasp of where you're at. As I've said before on this podcast, and for me, I'm the guy who evaluates everything. I'm always evaluating what people said, or how I reacted, or how I can do something better the next time. That's just the way my mind works. And what ends up happening is I have notes everywhere. I have notes over here about risk and fear and this topic and that topic and all these different topics that I am studying, that I am thinking about, that I am contemplating on a regular basis, trying to get a better understanding of, end up in notes scattered as I got sticky notes stuck over here, and I got notes on the back of a receipt over here because a thought came to my mind while I was driving, and then I have my work notepad that I'm keeping detailed notes on what I have going on at work, and I got notes on the back of that, or sometimes inside of a box on those pages. I got notes on my phone. I end up with notes everywhere, and I rarely have the time or have the capacity then to walk all of those thoughts through to a proper conclusion. And without bringing all those thoughts together to a proper conclusion, it makes it very difficult to act on those or to respond to those evaluations. And if you cannot bring those to a place where you can compartmentalize or bring them down to a small phrase or a small idea that you can throw in your back pocket and use or put into your life and put into action or use as a teaching point for your kids, then it kind of loses all of its value. So they have tools within this program that walk you through. They ask you questions, you answer the questions. It asks you questions, you answer the questions. And then by the time you get to the end of this, it has helped me sort through those thoughts, those ideas, in order to come out the other end with something tangible, something that I can hold on to, something that I've actually can use. Just for example, today, on this podcast, I talk a lot about risk and a lot about fear. And so today I was using this tool in the program and working through this idea of fear and risk and how they relate to one another. So I think there's some misunderstanding sometime about how they work and what they really are. And as I was working through, answering questions, typing things out, and you can type things out as much as you want to kind of get things, the full idea, the full topic out of your mind. So as I'm working my way through here, what came out at the other end is what will be the motto for me and the motto for this podcast going into this next year. I've already come up with a sweet t-shirt design that will go along with this. This t-shirt will be marked with 2021. This will be the official 2021 shirt of this podcast. But again, this came to me because I use these tools to work myself to this point. But what came out the other end of putting all this junk, all this miscellaneous stuff into this tool, what comes out the other end is, without fear, there is no risk. Without risk, there is no reward. I'm going to repeat that again, and I'm going to repeat it slowly because this should be the way we look at things moving forward. Without fear, there is no risk. What does that mean? I was listening to a business podcast earlier this week, and it was a couple of multimillionaires discussing investing in entrepreneurs or investing in different ventures. And one of them asked the other millionaire, well, when do you take a risk? And as I thought about that, and these are kind of the ideas that I'm feeding into these tools, is if let's just say you have $10 million in the bank and you're going to loan $10,000 or $25,000 or invest it into a business, a small startup, that's not really a risk because there's no fear involved. In order for there to really truly be risk, there must be fear involved. Because without fear, it is not a risk. And without risking something, there is no reward, right? Look back on your life. I cannot think of one time in my life where I have been rewarded where I did not take a risk. Whether it be the timing on having children, whether it be moving out to the homestead in Illinois, or whether it be moving to Texas, or whether it be quitting this job, or moving here, or talking to this person, or starting a podcast for me, or working on this book that I'm working on right now. These are risks. Are all of them going to have a reward at the other end? No, of course not. But if you want reward, you must be willing to take risks. So again, without fear, there is no risk. Without risk, there is no reward. That will be the motto for 2021 for Prepare.Defend.Lead podcast. And again, I will reveal this t-shirt probably at the first of the year. It will go on sale. I will reveal it on Instagram, maybe even do like a live New Year's celebration thing to present this idea, this concept, this vision, this new t-shirt going forward. So right there, for me, there has been value in this program just because of the tools. Just because of these tools where they help my scatter brain feed everything in and come out with something solid on the other end. And for me, this is one of the biggest reasons that differentiates this from any book, any program, anything else that I have seen. So let me kind of walk you through this program. There's also another tool that comes along with this that just helps you keep track daily of what you do. There's a huge emphasis in this about getting your relationship straight with your wife, taking responsibility for where that relationship is and moving forward in an effort to repair it. Big emphasis on your relationships with your children, making sure they are right, making sure that you are putting the efforts forward to build them stronger and deeper relationships with your children. There's a big emphasis in your business and understanding what your business and understanding what risks you should take and getting that in the right direction moving forward. But the real focus on all of this is the battle with your biggest enemy. The guy who looks back at you from the mirror every day. That is where your battle is. And this program helped me realize where the battle really is. Helped me realize my deficiencies, where I am messing up, where I am not as strong as I think or thought that I was. And by pointing those out, I can put in the efforts needed now in order to shore up those areas. So I wrote down kind of a little list here of thoughts from this, just to kind of describe what it is beyond my thoughts. So it's not really, except for the last 4 evolutions, which is what they call your daily homework, what you do each day. Except for the last 4, it's really not physical. It's not like 75 hard. The majority of what you're doing is homework, working through these tools to get a better understanding of who you are, to get a better grasp on who you are, so that you know what you need to do. So they focus on 4 areas in the program. Body, which is yourself, your mind, your physical body. Being, which is your relationship to God. Balance, which is your relationship with your wife, your children, your family, those that are important to you. And business. I talked already about the 2 tools that you get along with this program to use. Again, it's one of these things where you are only going to get out of it as much as you put into it. There were some days where I spent up to 2 hours working through the homework that needed to be accomplished that day so that I could stay on schedule. There is a time commitment involved. But at the end of the day, the extra maybe 40, 50 hours over the month that I put into this is cheap in comparison to what I got out the other side. got in my notes here. It's expose the lies and the false story that you are living. And exposed issues and gave tools to not only work on those, but to continue through the process. So the reality is, for me, if you are at a spot where you are even considering finding some sort of program, finding some way of pushing yourself to the next level of being a father, of being a husband, of being the leader, this, at the very least, you should look into it. For me, the $100 investment was a bargain. The other thing, and I'm being real honest with you guys here, and vulnerable with you guys, because I think it's necessary for you to really understand what can come out the other end as far as you after this. So I've been working on doing podcasting and playing businesses and playing entrepreneur now playing entrepreneur unsuccessfully now for 4 or 5 years, maybe even a little longer than that. And I have put the work in. I have put the hours in. I have hustled. I have ran. I have done what I thought I needed to do in order to have some sort of success. And this is part of the reason why at the beginning of this year when I quit Ever Vigilant, I was burned out. I was tired. I had been pushing and pushing. And there were times where at the old homestead, because I was working 40 hours a week and I was commuting 2.5 hours to work every day and another 3 to 3.5 hours home every night, taking care of animals, managing the homestead, helping manage the household, and at the same time was doing something like alpha orders, where that would take 4 or 5 hours probably on a Sunday to put that program together when I was running it, which was a free program that weekly gave out kind of some direction to help men straighten out things in their lives. So I was doing that alpha orders, and then I was also doing the podcast, and at the podcast at that time was an interview for every episode. So I was doing an interview for every episode, and editing that podcast would take 2 to 3 hours, plus the interview time. So the amount of time, the amount of energy, the amount of effort that I had poured into, in heart and soul really, poured into Ever Vigilant for very little return. Financially, business-wise, was rough. Now, on the other hand, did I learn a lot? I learned how to be more confident, how to be a better speaker, how to convey ideas through voice, how to have one-way conversations with myself as I look at a computer screen. And I met some great men who I had on to interview that I have relationships with that will continue for years to come. So those are the benefits that are sometimes hard to measure, right? Are they real? No doubt. Those are the benefits that I pulled away from it. But as a business, as a money-making enterprise, it was a complete and total utter failure. So as I began with Prepare.Defend.Lead, my mentality, my idea is that I need to work this into becoming a business. I need to get some sort of return on what I am doing here. Not only for me personally, but so that I can grow this and invest back into it in order to reach out to and get more men on board with the idea, with the concept of Prepare, Defend, Lead. So once again, I find myself doing Prepare, Defend, Lead and easily falling right back into the same place where I was with Ever Vigilant, right? Because that's what I know. I just know to hustle. I just know to try to do things. So another thing that doing this program and having the time to evaluate myself and having the tools to evaluate myself and my thoughts and my ideas to get a better grasp of who I am and what I am trying to accomplish here, what I realized is that, and the best way for me to paint a picture is that I'm sitting in a truck, stuck in the mud, spinning my wheels. We've all been there, right? Or you're in the snow and you're just spinning your wheels. You got the pedal to the floor. That gas tank is draining every single day, but you are going nowhere. And that's where I have been for quite some time. Pedal to the floor, pushing hard, hustling, doing this, doing that, trying to do this, trying to do that. Pedal to the floor all the way, gung-ho, we're going to make this happen. And in reality, you look around you, you look out the side windows, you look in the rearview mirror, and you're going absolutely nowhere. So with this program, one thing that I realized is that I was going nowhere. So what do you do then? When you realize, when you're off-roading, the moment you have no more forward momentum, and you drop that thing into reverse, and you can't get any movement going backwards, the first thing you're going to do is, no matter how muddy, no matter how wet, no matter how cold, no matter what the conditions, you got to get out of the vehicle and see where you're at. You got to evaluate your situation honestly. Can we throw some sand down? If I turn the front wheels to the right, am I able to get some traction? If I back up and turn my wheels to the left, am I able to get some traction going that way? What is my plan? What can I do to get this rig back on the road? Because sitting here, radio on, heat or air conditioning blasting, pedal to the floor is getting me nowhere. If you do not have a plan, if you do not know where your destination is, if you do not know where you want to go, how can you even set up those waypoints, and how can you even evaluate whether you are where you want to be? So this is another idea, another concept that came to me through this Wake Up Warrior Challenge. Is this going to be something that you see in your life? Probably not. But will the revelations and what's revealed to you and you getting a better grasp, a better understanding of your life possible? Very much so. But again, like I said, you're only going to get as much out of this process as you are willing to give into it. There's a lot going on each day. Each day you have homework, evaluation, running through these different tools. You have live video that you do for your Facebook group. You share your discoveries from the tool with the Facebook group. You watch other men's videos from this Facebook group so you can understand and share and see the struggle that they're facing as well, that you're not alone. Again, maybe I'm sounding like a salesperson here. Maybe I'm sounding a little crazy. But for me, this was powerful. So for the last 4 evolutions, last 4 days, or I think they stretch it out to last 8 days, but you have 4 different tasks to accomplish. You're given the mission for each day separately. When you're given that mission, you're given a video to watch that describes the mission. Then you're given a checklist to mark off each step of the way along this mission that you are given. And as I had mentioned earlier, the 4 steps, or the last 4 evolutions, are physical. They are going to take some energy, some effort for you. But I chose not just to do those in my neighborhood, not just to do those at a local park, but to drive out to our property that our house is being built on in hill country, out in rural Texas. Now, this took a little bit extra of a sacrifice on my part, because from where I live today, it's an hour drive to get there, and an hour drive home. But the reason I did that is because at this point, with 26 days down in this program, I knew that I did not just want to cavalierly do these last 4 evolutions. I wanted them to make a lasting impression. I wanted to go all in. I wanted to do these someplace where I was going to remember where they took place. So part of the evolution involved some stones and carrying some stones. I loaded those up into my backpack from my property. They will go back onto my property. Why? So that when I see those stones again, they will remind me of what I've done and where I've been. One day you needed to hike up a hill and spend some time at the top of that hill doing some journaling and walking yourself through some stuff. I can see that hill from my front porch. One part of the evolution, you needed to go down to a body of water. We went down to that river that all of you guys have seen if you subscribe to my Instagram. Went down to that river and did what I needed to do down there. Why? So that every time I go down to that river with my wife, with my kids, I will remember what I learned that day, remember the commitments that I made that day, in order to keep that fresh in my mind. Why am I telling you that part? Because I want you to know that that's how committed I was to keeping this fresh in my mind. For making sure that this month that I invested into the Wake Up Warrior program, that this month had value for years to come. Not just something that I did on a weekend at a retreat and 2 weeks later forget about. This was different. This, for me, was life-changing. This, for me, will alter the path, the direction that I go in, that this podcast will go in, that my wife, that my kids, that my family will go in. I've got something out of this that all the books, all the podcasts, all the audiobooks that I have read and listened to failed to deliver on. And that was a clear direction and the tools needed to go that direction. If you have questions about the Wake Up Warrior program, or you can direct message me on Facebook or on Instagram, and I'll answer your questions, and I'll answer them honestly. Is Garrett J. White for everybody? Of course not. Of course not. Is his version of being and of God the same as mine as a Christian? No. But for me, as I took this course, was it? Yes. Was there room for my God, the way that I worship and the way that I follow him? in the program? Yes, for sure. Does Garrett swear like a sailor? He sure does. And for some people, that's going to be a rough one to overcome. For me, coming from the business that I've been in for my entire career, I honestly don't even hear that stuff anymore. In fact, I'll go into a funny story here as we transition this podcast. I was working for a company here in Texas earlier this year, not the company that I'm presently working for, and one of the employees, I was in the vehicle with my boss, and an employee was screaming and yelling and swearing at me on the phone, so loud that my boss heard what this guy was saying. I immediately hung up on this employee, and my boss asked me, "Did you hang up on him?" I said, "Yeah, I'm not going to listen to that." So my boss wanted to write him up for his language and for talking to me that way. And so, of course, we needed to fill out paperwork on what was said or what went down during this incident. And my boss came to me, real good guy, really liked this guy, came to me and said, "So what did he say? Do you remember what was said and how it went down?" And I looked at him and I said, "No." He said, "Well, was he swearing at you?" And I said, "Look, I think that he was, but honestly, I have no idea what he said or if he was swearing at me. I have been around that type of language so often and for my entire career in construction that I pay no attention to it anymore. It's no longer shocking. It's no longer seems vulgar to me. It just is what it is. That is just how some people talk. That is how they like to convey their message. I choose not to, because I don't personally like it for myself. Does it offend me or bother me when other people do? No. Maybe when my children are around, I prefer that it not happen. But the reality of it is this kind of what life is. We have to learn how to accept other people for who they are and where they are at in their life. And just because somebody speaks a different language than you do, whether it be a more vulgar language or whether it be a foreign language, does not mean that they cannot give you valuable insight and that you cannot learn from them. Well, I did not intend to turn this whole podcast into a infomercial for Wake Up Warrior Challenge, and I hope that my personal stories that I mixed in there give you a little bit of an idea of how important this actually was to me. Again, I would like for anybody that's listening to this podcast to go do this. I wish that I had a program that could do something like this. Part of my vision, part of what I would like to do with Prepare.Defend.Lead is to build something not that similar, but with some of the same ideas that Wake Up Warrior has. So until that happens, until that can be a possibility, as I move forward, I think that this would be a great benefit to many of you that are listening to this podcast. And if there are any women listening to this episode, which happens from time to time, they do have Wake Up Warrior Challenge now for women. So that may be something that you would be interested in looking up. So this is cool. I'll tell you what, guys. When I started out Ever Vigilant, I was so nervous to do every episode. Every episode was really difficult for me. I am so much an introvert. I was so worried about how my message, how my ideas were going to come across, trying to make sure that I wasn't saying and 45,000 times, because then I needed to try to edit out at least half of them on those episodes. And it was a real struggle for me to to do those episodes. I ran across a guy a couple years after I had started it, and he told me, he's like, man, I really liked your podcast. He says, I had no idea how I stumbled across it during those early days. He said, but I did like it. But man, I never knew when an episode was going to come out. And that, more than anything, was because I was so nervous about doing episodes. And then over time, doing Ever Vigilant, it became such a chore. It became so difficult for me to do that episode, because to do the episodes each week, and at that time too, I was doing a lot of doing an episode while I drove each week, so that 2 episodes were coming out each week, and I saw no results. So you're working, you're hustling, you're fighting, and you see no results. And it really turned into a very difficult thing for me to keep doing. And I'll be honest with you guys, now that I took that break, that I took that time off, and here I'm coming forward with this new podcast with Prepare.Defend.Lead, and I am excited about it. I'm excited to see where this can go. I am excited to make an impact on the lives of those that are listening to this. Because I have been on a crazy ride for the last 5 or 6 years, whenever it was that I decided that I was not content with where I was at, that I was going to strive and push for something different. And my life has gotten better. Not that there's not ups and downs, and as I've been talking with my wife this week, and the foundation is poured on the new property. The material has been dropped off at the new property, but we have no schedule, no timeline for when the house will be finished. We're kind of playing it by ear. We know that we have the well scheduled for about 3 months from now to be dug, because of the waiting list is so long. Since I have really taken this step, go down the hard path. We have not taken the path of least resistance almost ever in the past 4 or 6 years, whatever it's been. We're always fighting, always struggling forward. And I don't mean fighting with my wife, but fighting to get where we want to go. And here's another thing that I learned from Wake Up Warrior, and I'm coming back to it again here, is that during the struggle, when you're fighting and you're fighting and you're fighting and you're hustling and you're trying to push something forward that feels like an immovable object, you don't just buy a house that's already pre-built. You go out and find this rural piece of property that you want, and we have to have a house built on it, and all these different steps of the way. Homeschool your kids. Continue making the move to Texas, making the move out to the homestead in Illinois, the struggles with buying animals and taking care of animals and learning about animals and building fencing and building storage sheds and building fire sheds and installing wood-burning stoves and cutting firewood and learning how to use a wood-burning stove. All these things, every step of the way, it's unbelievable. In fact, I should probably make a list along with her just to show all the different things that we have done the hard way in the last 5 years, because it's consistent. And it's not because we're suckers for punishment. But I'll go back to what I was going to say. When you are a pusher, when you are pushing yourself, when you are struggling to do the best you can at your job or in your own company, or you're always trying to be the best husband that you can be or the best father, when you're always making that push to succeed, to do better, what we often fail to do, and this is something I'm going to put a real point to do, and even mentioned it to my wife earlier today, as this year rounds out, to take some time to look back at our successes, to look back at what we have accomplished over this last year. To look back and say what we have accomplished over the last 5 years. How we have grown, how our marriage has grown, how our children have grown, what we have learned, what situations we've put ourselves in and overcome, the different challenges that we've fought ourselves through. So that lesson is out there for somebody. Somebody needed to hear that. Don't be afraid, especially as this year rounds out in this crazy coronavirus, crazy toilet paper shortage year of 2020. And maybe you didn't get to reach all your goals. Maybe you didn't get as far as you wanted to do. Maybe you lost a job that you thought was secure and had been there a long time. Look back at where you have come from and what you have actually accomplished this year, rather than get stuck only looking at what's on the calendar for tomorrow and how to knock that day out of the park. So I know that was a lot, and I will get into the chickens versus ducks right now. Let me grab my notes. So for those that are new listening to this podcast, we had a homestead in Illinois for about 4 years. We recently, a year ago, moved down to Texas and are going to be reestablishing. We're going to have a new homestead. We have our property. We have our home is being built right now. And I'll be quite honest with you guys, I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go with this new homestead, how different it's going to be, or what our main objectives are going to be. Had a lot of other things to think about, and it's a topic that we bring up a lot with my kids because they are very involved in taking care of the animals and day-to-day making sure they're watered and fed and having those responsibilities, which I think are one of the greatest benefits to living the homestead lifestyle, to having that type of responsibilities, is giving those off to your kids so that they can have real responsibility and see what that is like, because having real responsibility where something can live or die based on you taking care of what you need to take care of is quite different than making sure the dishes or laundry is done. And it was good for our family and good for them to have those responsibilities, my kids. And my daughter is 11 and my son is 9. So 4 years ago, you can see that there were 5 and 7 at the time when we moved out to the homestead. See, that was my quick math without my fingers. So when we first moved out there, giving them those responsibilities was a big responsibility. And something that we did together and walked them through the paces so they understood. But it was a learning experience for all of us at that time, because none of us had lived on a farm or a homestead, as we like to call what we were doing out there, with chickens and ducks. And we eventually ended up having geese, and we had goats, and of course dogs and cats out there. And then there towards the end, we ended up having rabbits as well. So all of these different animals need all sorts of different types of care. So there's a steep learning curve to what's going on. So I'm going to kind of share my thoughts on chickens and ducks. Chickens and ducks were the first animals that we had out on our homestead there in Illinois. And well, we're still debating as a family which one will be the first one out on our homestead here in Texas. Of note, another funny story is when we first moved out to Illinois and first moved out to the homestead there in Illinois, we wanted to start with some poultry. And I preferred ducks. At the time, I thought the ducks would be the way to go. So we called the tractor trailer supply near our home, and they were all out of ducks. Plenty of chickens, baby chicks, but no ducklings. So we called a tractor trailer supply that was probably 60 or 70 miles away, the next closest one. And yes, they had some ducklings in their store. So we drove all the way out there to get these ducklings. Really a cool moment as we walked into that store without having any animals on our property and walked out with the very first 5 animals, poultry, that we were going to introduce onto our homestead. Our first step, our first taste of what was going on. And of course, every single one of those 5 ducklings that my wife picked out ended up being a drake, a male duck. So our first foray into poultry and animal husbandry did not quite go as we had hoped. I ended up butchering those 5, which, again, another story we'll save for another day, but quite a moment in my life as I took the lives of those ducks and took it very seriously as you take something's life in order to give life back to you and your family. And that was the first of that. And then we rolled into having chickens. And over the course of our 4 years there, we had a lot of chickens. I think at one time we probably had between 10 and 15 laying hens. And then several times we worked through between 25 and 30 roasting hens or meat birds, broilers, through the property. So we ended up having a lot of experience with chickens. And then we ended up buying some adult chickens from a local farm where they were raising a heritage breed of ducks called silver apple yards. Very, very beautiful duck. In fact, they look a lot like your normal ducks that you would see out at your lake locally, like a regular mallard duck, with the females are brown and the males have the green head. Very sharp-looking ducks. They produce a lot of eggs, and were not, I won't say that they weren't friendly, but they avoided us pretty much all the time. So I'll get into kind of my thoughts here on ducks away from my personal experiences. So about both. Both are very hardy winter and summer animals. I only had one chicken die in the cold, and that was when we had a polar vortex rolled through Illinois our last winter there, and it was 30 degrees below zero, not including the wind chill. And one of the chickens, for some reason, she didn't make it back into the coop that night, and the next morning I found her frozen. But the other ones were hardy. Even when it was that cold, they were outside pecking around, looking for trouble. So very, very hardy animals, both the ducks and the chickens. Both chickens and ducks are great egg layers. There are some breeds of ducks that actually, like khaki Campbell's, I believe, lay more ducks or lay more eggs than any breed of chicken. So both depending on the type of chicken or duck, are great egg layers. All of them are probably going to lay over 300 eggs a year. No matter what type or breed of chicken or duck that you go with, you are pretty much guaranteed over 300 eggs per year from each. I see pictures all the time on Instagram of people holding their chickens and holding their ducks. That never happened for us. Once in a while, my kids would chase down one of the hens and hold it in their arms for a picture. And once it was in their arms and they held it securely, it would relax a little bit and they would enjoy stroking that chicken or duck. But it was never something that the chicken or duck had a say in. So how these people do that on the Instagram, I don't know how they treat their chicks or how they raise them up. Neither our chickens nor our ducks had any use for us other than providing food, which was fine with me because in return I was getting eggs. So as far as chickens are great hunters. They're great at scratching through compost. If you do a lot of composting or have compost piles, or if you have a lot of insects where you live, chickens are great. I believe that chickens are pretty good at eating ticks. Guinea fowl are even better for doing that. I don't know if you can hear it. Big Brute's upset about something. Our livestock guardian dog, who's now been introduced to home living, I don't think he'll ever be satisfied going back outside to live. But anyway, so chickens are easy to find. We would order ours online and have them delivered to the post office, and then we would pick them up at the post office, but they're also really easy to find every spring at Tractor Trailer Supply or at Farm and Fleet. And they have enough of a selection to where you can pick out what you want. So that's actually a really big benefit to chickens. The other thing that was very good about chickens is once they are used to where the coop is located and going into the coop each night, they are almost never have a problem going into the coop on a nightly basis. You rarely would even need to look and make sure they were in the coop. As long as that door was open as the sun was setting, they would almost all inevitably be in the coop, tucked in before you would go outside and closed up the door. My experience with ducks love the water. Obviously. They don't need the water to swim in and always have, but boy, do they love it. And one of the most joyous things about having ducks is watching them swim or watching them go out when be outside when it's raining or when you get puddles from the rain on your property, and just you can, as much as you can read the emotions of a duck, and maybe it's just me reading into it, they look like they were in heaven. It would be raining and there'd be puddles in the yard and they would just be happy as could be, flapping around and swimming around in the puddles in the yard. That was fun to watch. So that's a benefit there to ducks. They're a little bit harder to find. Like I said, we got those ducks from Tractor Trailer Supply, but they usually only have one breed of ducks there. They're usually probably going to have khaki Campbells, from my experience, which are actually a great egg-laying duck. The ducks that we ended up with, we bought full-grown so that we knew that we had ducks rather than drakes. We ended up buying a drake as well, so we had 5 female ducks and a drake, and that would lead them around. Ducks can be a little bit more difficult to get into the coop each night. Like I had mentioned earlier in this episode, I was getting up really early for my commute to work. So there were some nights where I needed to get them in the coop as the sun was setting. And there were nights where the ducks were just enjoying the weather and they were swimming in the creek or they were splashing around in puddles and did not want to go into the coop. And this is a big problem because I knew if I left them outside, there was a good chance that they would be eaten by predators. We had a few instances where a chicken didn't make it in the coop, or 25 of our broiler chickens in one night were eaten up by a weasel or killed by a weasel. So we knew we needed to get them in the coop each night. At times, that was a real struggle with the ducks. Normally, they would not be an issue. But there were times in the summer, especially when the weather was nice and they had places to swim, where it was really difficult. And I'm talking maybe five to 10 nights a year. So it's not a huge number, but on those nights, it was very, very frustrating chasing ducks around and trying to get them to go into the coop. The other thing about ducks is they are good at aerating the soil. While chickens scratch and peck, ducks love to bury their beaks, or their bills, I should say, into the soil. So especially if it's wet or moist area, they're just going to aerate and make holes all over in your soil, which where we were, that wasn't a problem. If somebody has a nice yard or really cares about their lawn, that could be a potential problem. But it's also aerating that lawn, so it's probably a good thing either way. So this is what I have to say about both. I do like ducks better. So in this chickens versus ducks, I will go with ducks. Here's my reasoning. I enjoyed watching them in the water. To me, that was a blast. That was so much fun watching them splash around, and it was fun to watch the drake duck with the female with the ducks following after him everywhere he went. Was really cool to watch. They're much more organized, while somewhat dirty because they like to be in the mud and they like to be in the water. They're also cleaner, sleeker animal, or I should say bird, than the chickens. They are much more attentive to their surroundings and what's going on. So I think they're probably a little bit less predator resistant. One thing that is interesting with chickens is once chickens go to sleep, they're pretty much dead for the night. They do not have the ability to really wake up or protect themselves or do anything for predators. Where ducks, on the other hand, are a little bit more vigilant to what's going on. The other reason I would pick ducks is their eggs are amazing. Duck eggs are just a little bit bigger than chicken eggs, but they have a much firmer yolk and are preferred by bakers for baking. And I can attest to that from making a lot of pancakes and making things back when we had a lot of chicken and duck eggs, and I would always use the duck eggs. I believe I read somewhere that they're preferred in France because they tend to, things baked with duck eggs tend to rise more. Whether that's true or not, I just know that over easy they are fantastic because they got that firmer yolk. And then I'll throw in just a little bit here. We did have geese on the property, and we got these kind of secondhand and didn't have them over an extended period of time. But I would very much like to consider getting geese for our new property. For one thing, they are absolutely a beautiful bird. They are so strong and so sleek. They are beautiful to watch. We had a male and a female, and he was very protective of her and was with her all the time. The eggs from the geese were spectacular. The duck eggs were a little bit bigger than the chicken eggs, and the geese eggs were quite a bit bigger than the duck eggs. So they were a real treat, especially to eat for breakfast, to have over easy or something. So I thoroughly enjoyed having the geese. Where the geese may be a problem, and I have a great video of my wife being chased by the geese, is because they are so much bigger of a bird. If they are aggressive, they are a little bit more scary than a rooster or a drake duck. So again, depending on how they're raised, depending on your situation, depending on where you're at, I believe that they are a viable poultry to consider. They do not lay as many eggs. We would probably get about half as many eggs from the geese. She would lay probably every 2 or 3 days versus every day like the chickens or ducks. So I wanted to throw that into the mix. Again, it's probably something that will be thrown into the conversation as we progress forward with our new place here in Texas as far as what we want to get. Everybody kind of in my family kind of has their own ideas and thoughts on what they liked. And the bottom line of where we're at is probably that everybody wants to replicate what we had before and have a little bit of everything. I'm not sure that that's the direction that I want to go in. So we'll see. We'll play it by ear. We're still kind of discussing these things as a family and sorting things out of what we want and what direction that we want to go in. Because one of the things that we did the last time was rush into a lot of things. And everybody's going to tell you, don't rush into things. But when it's your first time buying animals and baby goats and baby ducklings and baby chicks and stuff, it's hard to tap the brake and not move forward. So I'm never going to tell people what they should do in that area. It will be overwhelming and it will make things much more difficult for you. But the reality is, I can tell you that I prefer ducks over chickens. I could tell you that I prefer chickens over ducks. These are decisions that you can only make for yourself through your own experiences. Because I'm telling you this, and you could go on YouTube and find 1,400 people that would tell you the opposite. You can find 1,400 people that would tell you that something else is the way to go. And that's what's awesome about doing this stuff. You have to get out and do it for yourself. Doesn't matter how many videos you watch, doesn't matter how many podcasts you listen to, doesn't matter how many books you read. Until you start to do it, if you've never done it, until you start to do it, you really have no idea. But that's what's awesome. That's the growing experience. That's the learning. That's how you move forward in your life. It's by putting yourself in situations where you don't know what you're doing and using other people's thoughts and advice along the way and coming up with your own conclusions, coming up with your own thoughts and your own evaluations. So we'll see what we do going forward. I think my daughter has a big vote in there for a peacock. She wants to have a beautiful peacock running the property there, which I have to admit would be pretty neat. But we'll see what direction we go. We'll see if we come up with something different and exotic to completely change things up, or if we go with chickens or ducks or geese or some sort of combination of all of them. Well, if you made it this far into the podcast, thanks for listening. And there's a few things I would appreciate it if you could do for me. If you enjoy this podcast, if you understand and enjoy what you hear here and understand the idea behind the mission of Prepare.Defend.Lead and want to help, there are a few things that you can do that will cost you absolutely nothing. And that would be to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. Number 2, you can write a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. That may make a big difference between people who continue listening to, or that will listen to this podcast and give it a shot, or going to scroll right on by. Your review can have a huge impact. And number 3, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with people that you think want to learn more about what things I talk about here on this podcast. That way we can push this mission forward, we can grow, we can expand, we can open up new opportunities for this podcast moving forward. You can go to Prepare.Defend.Lead.com, and on there I have some t-shirts and some stickers, and a link to sign up to receive a free copy of the book that I am currently working on, titled Open. This book was written really at the beginning of a lot of what I've been talking about in this episode, right at the beginning of me making a decision to make some changes, to start moving in a different direction, was where this idea, this concept of open started. So if you'd like to learn more about that, and you would like to receive a free digital copy of that book before I put it on Kindle, before I get it on print on demand, if you would like to do that, you can go to Prepare.Defend.Lead.com, hit that link, give me your email address, and I will make sure that gets sent off to you. And as we go into this holiday season, in this crazy, stressful year, make sure you remember the reason for the season. It's not about us. It's about a little baby that was born many, many years ago. And along with that story, along with that baby being born, let's make sure that we do what we can to treat those with different thoughts, different opinions, different ideas that are in our family with the love and respect that they deserve. With all that, as always, hold fast and God bless.